my computer. So welcome at the so many level 2 session I'm having. I'm also training some degree studies for chaplains, pastors who wants to complete a degree in chaplaincy. So yesterday night we also discussed the same, not the same slides though, but the same topic. So welcome. I'm happy to see you here. Apologies if there's going to be some interruptions, because some people will be late after their prayer meetings at church, and that's understandable. So yes, we're gonna just open with a prayer with no further ado, and let's get started with this class. Heavenly Father, Almighty God, we want to glorify you in this day, and we want to thank you for this opportunity we have in this learning acquisition, Lord, just to be of better use inside of our communities, Lord, outside of the gates of the church. Our prayer is, Lord God, that you will bless us as we further our studies, as we further our knowledge and the scope we've got about people outside the gates of the church. In the past, Lord, we've been strangers for the people outside, but these days we've become their friends, and we thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunities, Lord, you create for us. Thank you that you bless us as we speak the word of gospel, the word of the gospel outside the gates in the camp of the church. Amen and amen. So yes, welcome everybody. I see everybody here. If you fall asleep, don't stress yourself out. It's quite cool here in Rustenburg. Some of our other students, they've notified me they've got some load shedding, or I do not call it load shedding. I call it load sharing. That's a better name for it. I don't know why they say load shedding, because it's nothing as such, because most of the Gauteng areas are off, as we are on, so it means they are sharing that we can have electricity on our end. So yes, I just want to share my screen. So probably tonight we'll just discuss law enforcement chaplaincy. I'll give you some homework for disaster response chaplaincy. We'll just maybe look at one or two things in disaster response chaplaincy later tonight. But I think by 8 o'clock we'll be finished with most of the work so that you can spend some time with your families. So yes, yeah, as you can see, you are on page 54. On page 54, on my slides or on my manual, but most probably on your electronic version of the manual, you'll find this coursework on page 52. If you don't have this course manual, of course, you can email me, or you can just ask on the group. Many people have got it on the group, so they will just share it there. And it's so easy as that. So I just want to start off with this little small insert video. Let me just show it to you. Here we go. There we go. It's very slow. And it's not the load shedding. It's just sometimes, you know, when you press a button too many times on your PC, things like this happens, and this is what's happening right now. All right, there you go. I can see it. It's a TikTok. It's about this lady. She's been asked to do a sobriety test by these two cops over here. And as you have, some of you know me for a very long time now. I'm fond of police force chaplaincy. I just love the police. I will always see the good in these men and women serving in uniform, blue uniform, brown uniform. If they are in police, I just love them to the moon and back. So, so they asked her to do a sobriety test, and of course, you know, a sobriety test is to check if you are all there after you have drink some liquor. Look at this lady. Excuse me, my throat is not all that well yet, but please bear with me. Okay. Look at this test. Now you can see she's in real big trouble. She was driving actually. All right, there you go. So there's 4 distinct categories in law enforcement chaplaincy, and you probably know these by heart because this will be in your test, and you'll be asked to identify the 4 distinct categories in law enforcement chaplaincy. We have the volunteer community services chaplaincy. You can find all of this in your coursework on page 52. Please, if you don't mind, you can just go there and just mark it that we'll get this question And I saw that by accident. I sent an email some time back. I thought it was manual. I sent an exam, a level 2 exam. Now, you won't get all of those questions in your exam. Some will be the new questions. So do not think that you're going to get all of that questions right out of that paper I've sent you. So within the realms of the law enforcement chaplain, there are 4 distinct categories of law enforcement chaplaincy. First off, we get the volunteer or the community services chaplain. This is what we are doing now. We are volunteers. We volunteer in the different departments. We volunteer in places where other people seem to not show interest in volunteering, as in with the law enforcement chaplaincy. Now, the volunteer or community services law enforcement chaplain is one who serves a law enforcement agency in addition to their other full-time employment. For example, the community service chaplain may be very well a chartered accountant or a doctor. We've got doctors, medical doctors also in our chaplaincy division. And you serve in that capacity, but you also serve in a community service capacity. You can even be in the force, in the police force, and serve as a community service chaplain for the police. You just have to report to the police chaplains and ask them to guide you somewhat and to get to know them better, of course. The community services chaplain should make every attempt to keep themselves accessible by the agency and should not consider themselves a loose cannon, because we're not that kind of people, or kind of a free roamer. Like, for example, you just roam around the offices, do what you want to do, and you go. No, we report, because we are serving in a volunteer capacity doesn't mean we should be unprofessional. Then we have the part-time chaplain. Now, the part-time chaplain, partially paid chaplain or paid position for the chaplain. Excuse me. I warned you before. The part-time chaplain will face the difficult challenge of having to serve 2 masters at once. So if the chaplain, pastor, or service the church in another ministerial capacity, he or she will have the responsibility of the church as well as the demands of the agency they are serving as a chaplain. Now, this agency can be a police office or a fire brigade office, or you can even work at Telkom, whatever the case may be. You will always have to serve 2 masters, and that's very difficult, but it's also very fortunate and a very great blessing to be a part-time chaplain. Then we have the chaplain officer. We have the chaplain, or the officer is a person who may be sworn peace officer who has also experienced a calling from God, and as a primary police officer working a full-time job also in this capacity as police officer. We had some police chaplains, and they were also police officers, many of those all over the world. So then we've got the full-time paid chaplain, and this is an ecclesiastical agency, of course, and there needs to be an ecclesiastical appointee by a church or a para church organization sponsors a clergy person to fill this position, and this is the case in the US. Our church over there, they sponsor the chaplain in the force, in the military, in any security agency. The agency itself sees the need to have spiritual and counseling direction from someone who is aware of the peculiarities of the occupation. And also then the chaplain may actually be hired as a training coordinator of the employee assistance program or person, or the EAP. He or she will be responsible to fulfill a number of necessary duties within the EAP section, among which are the chaplain responsibilities. I've been honored to serve in this position or capacity for almost 19 years, yes. And it was really a privilege for me to serve in that capacity. So I'm a retired chaplain, uniform chaplain. So yes. Now, you'll find this on page, let me just be sure of my page, and your page is different, it seems like that. This will be on page 53 on the bottom side of that. Now, it's talking about the ESP. We have discussed this in level 1. If you haven't been to level 1 yet, I encourage you to do that, to go and make a U-turn at level 1. But these are the emergency services personnel profiling, and how to profile a person. What makes a police officer tick, in other words, or If the chaplain is unaware of this stimuli, these things we are going to discuss right now, if you are unaware of the stimuli which motivate an officer of the law, it will become very difficult to respond to the officer's needs. If you know about these things, it will be easy for you to respond to these specific needs. Now, you'll find this all of this in your coursework, of course. But the first characteristic or the first trait of the EAP of the, the police officer, this person may be an obsessive compulsive controller. Now, law enforcement officers generally want to do things right. They do not want to do things wrong and are not often happy until things are done to their own satisfaction. Now, the comedian who ran for mayor in the states of Illinois, and I do not know if you know the story, but it's an excellent story. He was a very committed mayor, and his dad phoned him and asked him, and I've listened to this mayor speak on the show of Huckabee, Governor Huckabee. I do not know if you know this person, but he's a very good guy. He was governor in the U.S. I think it was Illinois, but nevertheless, he's also a pastor for many years now, Pastor Huckabee. So he got this comedian, and his name is Jeremy, and he was an elected official in one of the cities in the state of Illinois. Very committed. So his dad phoned and asked him, Jeremy, why do I get this fine in the mail? And Jeremy's answer to his dad was, Dad, because your grass is too long. You have to mow your grass, Dad. But Jeremy, you mow my grass, he said. His father said. You should have called me sooner, Jeremy replied, because now you owe the town $300 and you owe me $50 extra for coming to cut the lawn. So yes, so this is kind of an obsessive, compulsive, controller kind of behavior of an elected official like this mayor. And he said it was a true story though. And then we've got the action-oriented, easily bored kind of person. And these are all the traits of the ESPs, the emergency services persons, but police also falls into this category, of course. They are action-oriented. They are very easily bored. They may often be perceived by the public and the members of the families as narrow-minded and self-centered kind of people. They feel need to serve and protect the other people around them. Now it's not only that, they're also risk takers, They take risks, whereas other people would not take the same risk because of their high dedication in their jobs. They cannot understand why others do not see the dangers they are in. They're often in for the sake of the very people who are criticizing. So I will never criticize a cop because you do not know what they're going through as individuals. And of course, they are strong. They've got a strong need to be needed. They want to be needed. They've got this satisfaction of a job well done. It's important to all. It is, however, an imperative for the law enforcement officer to feel needed. And of course, they are needed in our communities. We need the cops. We need the blue. And we need to back the blue as far as we can. They also have a difficult time to say no to people who approach them about certain things, about certain police activities or certain jobs to be done, my husband is in the bar again. Would you come and help me, please? Of course, he will leave his own family and he'll go and get you out of the bar. One of the greatest stories of sources of stress and frustration is a person's inability to say no. And pastors are also falling short are also in this category because we also have a difficult time to say no. And you as a chaplain, you should understand that sometimes you'll have to say no. Because when you always say yes, you'll have to say somewhere no. You cannot always respond with a yes. You can only respond with one yes, 7 o'clock. If you respond with 2 yeses for 7 o'clock, then you'll have to multitask. Police officers are no less guilty of this age-old problem, and that is the strong need to be needed. Now, of course, burnout will occur, and the need to be needed and the difficulty to say no, they will come to a place of burnout. It will result in burnout. This burnout will manifest itself in a variety of symptoms. You'll be tired, you'll be cognitive depleted, you'll be irritated all the time. So they also have a strong rescue personality, the cops, They've got a strong rescue personality. They want to feel, they are doing something good for the community. It is often a genuine desire to help and rescue those who cannot help themselves at a particular time of their lives. Excuse me. There is, however, a fine line between the rescuer and the Messiah complex. And you, as a chaplain, as a pastor, you need also understand that you shouldn't fall into the Messiah complex mentality. Once this line is crossed from rescuer to Messiah complex, once this line is crossed, the officer will tend to feel, failure if they cannot meet the need of a person who just called them for help. Remember, chaplain, you cannot help everybody. Some people will slip through the fingers and slip through the cracks. Even though, we spend a lot of time helping people because we're in helping ministry, helping profession, we cannot help everybody. We feed about 60 to 80 people every morning here at the gate. We submit CVs, we help people to find jobs. And I must say, the success story is a little bit slim, There's not so many successes amongst all of these people because many of them, they are happy on the streets. They love to live on the streets. So you cannot rescue everybody. So I had to come to a place in my own ministry. I thought to myself, if I can do what General Booth did, and he had the three S's for his success story with the Salvation Army. He started the Salvation Army, and he said he succeeded in soap and salvation. That was the three S's. And I also our ministry is based on this year, but you cannot feel you need to rescue everybody because ultimately Christ is the Messiah, not you and I. Then we've got people in the police force that's family oriented, but they're only verbally family oriented. Verbally, the very thing which makes the police officer good at what they do is often the very thing which makes the officer a failure at marriage and family. So what makes them good in their job sometimes makes them bad at home. They're also driven by internal motivations, these people, the cops, not highly paid. Of course, many cops feel they're not highly paid. And although here in South Africa, it's a different situation. Cops are getting paid a lot of money. They're getting huge salaries. The benefits of civil service are not particularly abundant, outside of the borders of South Africa. But some really are struggling, and yet men and women continue to take this risk. Although they do not get as much pay that they deserve, they work long hours, and they suffer ridicule from the press as well as the public. People mock them, joke with them, generally work at a job that is so thankless, Understand the officer is driven by internal motivation, and not external motivation. So they do not want to get a pat on the back every time you see them, but they want to say hi and, hi and bye kind of thing. They want to be appreciated by the community. Then generally, they've got this high tolerance for stress. They've got a very high tolerance for stress, but not immune. Listen, they've got this tolerance for stress, but they're not immune against stress. This tolerance is relative to the job they do. Venting stress on families often occurs. They go home and they just vent on the family. They also have a high tolerance for anxiety. And the reason for that is because they are trained to have a high tolerance for anxiety. They are trained how to deal with crisis. They treat the public respectfully, although everything is going to pieces around them. They still treat the public with due respect. Because of this training, they can be mild anxious, and you won't even know that they are anxious. They learn to maintain control at all costs at a scene. They learn to tolerate certain things which others would not be able to tolerate. Now, this is where the stress management axiom of pay me now or pay me later comes in. Because if they cannot pay now, for their stressors and be debriefed at that stage, of course, they will have to pay later. They will be put into a psychiatric ward or something like that. The officer will only be able to maintain control for so long without having to pay a physiological cost. And when you pay a physiological cost, it will cost you a lot because you'll be booked off from your job for post-traumatic stress disorder. You'll stay away from the working environment for 6 months. You'll be out of circulation. And when you come back and there's an opening in a senior position, what will happen is they say, oh no, this guy is just from post-traumatic stress. Although they say they may not discriminate against you, of course, all of those people, they will remember, and we've seen the interview, they will remember that you've just come from post-traumatic stress disorder leave. Then we've got this insert also, and this is a kind of thing that's going on in the US. Police abuse from the public becomes more obvious than ever before. This was taken in San Dimas in California, and you know what, people, I hate to show you this, but this is what's happening in our world. People are screaming and yelling at police. Why people are taught not to have respect for the police in the first case, I do not understand, because they have no respect for themselves also, these kind of people, showing no respect for others. Jesus even said that we should love our enemies. Why would they not love the police? Why would they not love the police? Now, I see the Americans are backing off with this defund the police thing now these days because they see what's going on and what they've been doing was wrong. But we need the police, people. We need them desperately. We cannot protect ourselves. Sometimes you'll need the police to come into your home, to come and see what the criminals took and how to find those criminals. Just in 2 weeks or 3 weeks time, they broke in twice in our church building here next door. Twice. They stole to the value of 125,000 rands of stuff. And it's crazy, but we live in a real world. But every time the police was here to come and try to take fingers and stuff like that, I respect the police, not because of what they are doing, but because, of their uniform. I respect that they are, willing to run towards a gun, a shooting, and we run away. I respect them for that. So, and unfortunately, the Americans sometimes bring things upside down, and that's what's happening. And when they defund police, they do not know what they are asking, because this generation asking them, they would soon ask, "Come, please, I need more police." Mostly, the police is respectable in the USA, and these people attack the police. These are brainwashed individuals. Listen carefully what I'm telling you. I've already published something about brainwashing for you to watch. So I hope you watched that video. But we had an in-person class or a Zoom class in that. But the thing is, we are seeing so much brainwashing in our world these days that people see things that was wrong normally as right. Some of these people, they would even allow a baby to be aborted after birth. It's a crazy world. It's a crazy world. I do not understand where they get their evil thoughts. So we see white people advising black people in these days to call out to defund the police there in the USA because of white supremacy, which is not the case, of course. I was living there in 2013. I was traveling all over the US in that time with chaplaincy and so on, and also in 2016 for 11 months. I saw none of that. I must say to you, honestly speaking, there's a lot of brainwashing going on in our world. So, let me show you this video a little bit. Excuse me. See, she will tell, you can read also the lines there. What's going on with my video? There we go. I pulled you over because you're a murderer. Yes, I started to record because you can't be on your cell phone while you're driving. I was recording you because you can't use your cell phone while you're recording. May I have your driver's license? It's at my apartment. Thank you. And I'm perfectly legal, and I'm a teacher. So there. Congratulations. You're a murderer. Can I thank you for using your cell phone while you're driving? That's it. Is it done? Yeah, for him being a Mexican racist. What is that name? Yeah. On the citation, yeah. There you go, Mexican racist. You're always going to be a Mexican. You'll never be white. You know that, right? Right, so you can go and Google this video a little bit further on, and you're most welcome to do that. But just let me go on with the class for now. So any mood swings which the ESP encounters can be assessed in light of the traits mentioned above. And these are the traits emergency in the ESP profile, what we just mentioned. But some of these traits, can be can have characteristics generally started throughout the emergency services agencies. When the chaplain is aware of the motive behind the action, he or she can begin the process of prevention or management when dealing with these employee problems or the suffering with a personal, emotional, physiological, spiritual, or psychological problem even. So some of these police officers, they will have mood swings in the light of their traits, and of course, process of prevention and management. You can be a great help in managing their the situation, their crisis. Some time back, I pitched on Christ in crisis. What an amazing time, to find Christ in crisis, because he's the best one to help you through this crisis. And you are his vessel, you are his voice in this world as a chaplain. Things which make the ESP good at what they do occupationally will be the thing that will become destructive to their family responsibilities or relationships. So if they are good police officers or ESPs for that matter, sometimes that things will start to count against them, because the wife would say, oh, but you always care for your job, you didn't care for us and this family, you can protect the whole world, but you cannot protect this house. Stress manifests itself at work, at home, as well as recreation and pleasure. So we need to separate myth, ESP myth and fact from one another, because there is separation there. And we hear many times that a cop doesn't cry, a fireman isn't afraid, or an EMT doesn't mind the sight of blood. But the truth behind that is an ESP, an emergency services person, spend a lot of time trying to live up to these images the world thinks about them. A cop doesn't cry, a fireman isn't afraid, or a EMT doesn't mind the sight of blood, but which result in different types of emotional pain, as well as the stress administered, because they try to keep this thing in, because a cop cannot cry, and if they cry, they would be seen as weak, and if they are afraid of the fire, they would be seen as weak. It's part of their ability to appear to remain composed and calm during extreme or extremely stressful and critical events. They are just as subject to all the problems and stress symptoms as any other worker in any other setting. So they also experience what we are experiencing. You know that. We hear the philosophy, and we hear the shoot to live philosophy. Remember now what we've been taught, and we always been taught: shoot to kill. If you pull your gun, you kill. That's not what it's about. When you pull your gun, you shoot to live. You do not shoot to kill. Somebody's going to die when somebody pulls the gun on the cop, So the question here is, of course, who broke the rules? Who broke the rules? So if you pull a gun on a cop, who's at wrong? Who's at blame? The cop will shoot to live. And he will shoot to protect the lives of innocent bystanders. So that's the rule. Who broke the rule? Sometimes if you shoot to kill, of course, it means for the wrong reason. We do not shoot to kill, we shoot to live. And that's a philosophy we'll have to stick by. Now, the Psyche of Survival video, I do not know if it's included here. I'll just check well, I do not think I'm going to show it to you right now because it's about 30 minutes. Yes, I remember now, 30 minutes. But the Psyche of Survival video is a must for all law enforcement chaplains to view. This video is produced by the ATF and can be borrowed from the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms, as well as the FBI or the US. It's about police trauma. This is what the video is about. How an undercover officer was shot on a bus. This cop was dressed in civilian clothing, but he was shot on this bus. It's about the psychology to stay alive in the midst of this emergency. What happened to him when he was shot? Let me just see if I've got this video over here. If you don't mind, I won't show it now because the time won't allow us. But I'll share this video with you. Let me share it on our. Let me try. Oh well, I'll just share it afterwards. I'm still going to get it here now. Just remind me, please, if I forget about this. But it's about the caliber press. If I forget to share it to you, it's on the caliber CALIBRE press, like the press, you know. It's an officer safety video. You just Google that and you'll find it there on YouTube. Now this is the ultimate survivor video. You can watch from minute 11.15, somewhere there. And this officer, he had his body cam on, and you'll see what happened and transpired during that bus and when the officer got shot. There's some other guidelines and policy for handling line of duties. I'll just go through these because it's some few of these. I think it's about 20 something guidelines for handling line of duties or duty death. You need to request medical assistance in all cases, no matter what happens. You need to request. This one is becoming busy now. She's sitting on my lap the whole time. Now she wants to be part of the class. Boy, sit down. So you need to request medical assistance in all cases. When it happens, you need to ask for medical assistance. Also ensure a chaplain or other competent caregiver has been dispatched to the home of the officer involved. When possible, do not mention over the radio the circumstances until the family has been notified and placed in the custody of caregivers. Because if they hear something, you know, and there's no caregiving for them, they may be they may harm themselves, you know. Personally, coordinate investigations until the staff appointed inspector is dispatched to the scene. So when a person comes to the scene, and for example, the cop is shot and you try to protect the scene, and somebody comes and they want to inspect the area, you'll have to ask from where are you? You need to prove that you know, with their ID cards. Secure the scene, if you may, as far as you can, of course. I mean, you're just a police chaplain. You're a police chaplain for the assistance of the police, not for the. And in this sense, you're not for the public there, but you're there for the cop. Request additional personnel as warranted on the scene. You should take the radio. Therefore, before you get into a patrol car, you have to acquaint yourself with the radio call signs and then how to speak over the radio. Broadcast critical information to back up responding units. Only critical information. Do not give them the whole setup. Just tell them there's been a shooting, an officer is down, and there is two what you call it, assailants. They ran north. They're on this street and that street, so the cops can be on the lookout for those assailants. Then point 8, notify the chief or the captain, the city manager, chaplain, and others as directed by the chief of police. Avoid also having involved officers conduct any investigation or interviews relevant to the shooting. For example, the cop shot somebody. Do not allow the cop to investigate his own shooting incident. Ask him not to do that. You are at full right to do that because he will, of course, damage his own case if he should investigate his own shooting incident. Allow involved uninjured officers to drive their own patrol cars to the headquarters, accompanied by chaplain or fellow officer as soon as possible. And then assign informed supervisor, chaplain, or close friend to involve officer and the family of the deceased or the injured officer. Point 12, ensure the involved officer's family is personally briefed as soon as practically possible. So you can also be involved in the briefing process of the family, but I would say rather get some other chaplain inside and phone another chaplain, wake them up and to come along and to come and help you to do the debriefment of the family, because they'll probably need that. And then we're going to turn the page here to number 13 in your manuals. And this is identify or locate and interview all personnel and witnesses at the scene. Excuse me. Discuss the legal ramifications for the officer involved. You would know probably what will happen to an officer that is, that just shot somebody and killed somebody. So you can discuss some of the legal ramifications with the bystanders and with the witnesses as well as, on the scene. The request interview or of involved officers by someone sensitized in the area of post-critical incident trauma, because of course this officers will be suffering of post-traumatic stress syndrome. 16, support for the officer and cooperation with the inquiry must both be considered. And then 17, make every effort to ensure any statement required of an officer involved in a shooting are only given after the officer has been afforded some rest, some time off to regain composure, and they're capable of understanding, their rights and responsibilities, and that they're cognitive, better off and after some rest. And then 18, allow an assigned post-shoot peer counselor, if requested by the officer, to be present at all of the interviews, if you may. Excuse me. Now, there may be some long-term issues concerning that, and that is every effort will be made to facilitate the investigation of a shooting incident. So because of the seriousness of this case, this will be thoroughly investigated, and any kind of shooting will be thoroughly investigated to see if the cop was at wrong, or of course if the perpetrator was at wrong. So you do not have anything for the test there. Don't stress yourself about that. Assignment changes or length of recovery and any non-routine adjustments will be discussed between the officer and the administration. We are on page 61 in my manual right now, if you want to turn there. And also follow-up counseling will be made available as needed. So you need to follow up with these people. An effort will be made to allow the officer to tell their story in appropriate training sessions. So what we use normally is the Mitchell model for post-traumatic stress, or actually for debriefing, the debriefing model. And then number 5, all reports, recognition, and references shall be carefully worded so as to be sensitive to the emotional impact they may cause on the officer. So we need to help them with that if we can, because we are not directly involved. If you're on the scene, of course, maybe you've seen too many things, and you'll also have to talk to somebody in due course. Now, this will be in your test, of course. This is the 5 ways we can help in domestic violence. And the first one we can help with is a pro-arrest policy. Now, the pro-arrest policy, you'll find this on page 61 at the bottom there. The law enforcement chaplain will quickly learn firsthand about domestic violence. He or she will be called upon time and again to accompany a police officer or a sheriff or a cop to the scene of a domestic violence incident. The chaplain must learn very quickly that they're no longer in a pastoral role. You've taken off the cap of a pastor, you've put on the cap of a chaplain, and especially so at these incidents, because now you're not anymore their pastor. I mean, the domestic violence people, those who are violating themselves. The chaplain must learn very quickly they are no longer the pastor, and especially to those at the incident. Most police and sheriff's departments have distinct or strict guidelines governing their arrest policies of perpetrators of domestic violence. The chaplain may find themselves sometimes inclined to take sides in an incident. For example, if this is a member of your church, you would be inclined to take sides on an incident. Not only is this dangerous, but it can also place both the chaplain and the police officer in a very precarious, if not a dangerous situation. Chaplains in the pastoral role within the parish are often called upon by the members of the family to assist them, to assist people in that regard. So I'm sorry, I just moved on. Excuse me. We also have orders of protection. You'll find this on page 62 again. Orders of protection. You can go and read in your own time. Orders of protection, ex parte of protection, and other legal instruments are often used as or after a domestic violence incident. Victims of domestic violence are encouraged to secure from a magistrate or a legal instrument to serve upon the perpetrator for domestic violence. We also find shelters. Many people will be placed in shelters. Find out in your city where you're staying, and you can find this piece of work on page 63 in your manuals. It is necessary for the chaplain to familiarize themselves with the domestic violence shelters, as well as safe houses in your city, because people will ask you about those. They will ask you, do you know about the shelter here in town? Or the CSC must honor this confidence. If they tell you where is a shelter, the police tell you this is a shelter on 17th Zenland Street, you should be, you need to honor this confidence, because you cannot tell people this is a shelter home or so on. It is imperative that the chaplain not yield to temptation and reveal this knowledge to anyone at all if they know about shelters in the city. And then we have the crisis centers. Crisis centers are not altogether different from a shelter and safe house with regards to the confidentiality and the client protection plan for you. You need to protect those people with your lives. Crisis centers deal not only with abusive situations, but also with issues of rape, pregnancy, teen pregnancies, post-abortion situations, as well as suicide. So then we have the victim witness program. Now this program will be addressed later in the section, but it is necessary for the chaplain to know that the victim of domestic violence needs to be introduced to this program, to the victim witness coordinator, if you will. The coordinator will assist the victim, and sometimes the coordinator will be a police officer in town appointed to be of assistance in that regard. Now, we've got domestic violence abuse. Pastors and Christian caregivers are often first called, when abuse is reported. They will call you up, and you need to be careful when you pick up that call, because people will abuse the pastor. And the reason why these responders must be willing to accompany the victim on the long way home with empathy, intimacy, as well as in intercession. Some have been familiarized, victimized as a result of choice they made. Others have been victimized by being abused by the significant others. Let me just help this little one. Hello. Sit still, mate. All right. So yes, and so we have domestic violence calls also listed here. And what's the chaplain's role about that? We have eyes, people. We have even, we may even get involved in a physical fray or a fight at the domestic violence home. If you're there for the officer's help, you're there to protect this officer, not but these to protect you, but you're an extra set of eyes, an extra set of fists. Building a trusting relationship with this officer will help you in due course. If the officer believes the chaplain is there to earn some type of spiritual merit badge or a little badge from his family or his church, the police officer will not bond with the chaplain if you're there for the wrong reasons. And in addition, that chaplain will not be trusted. So stay out of the way. There's some do's and don'ts on page, let me just check quickly for you. I believe page 65, we're on page 65. There's some do's and don'ts you can work through. Yes, on the bottom of that, page 65. let me just quickly give you a couple. You can stand to the rear and side of the officer when you knock at the door. To the rear and side, all right? Back there. But don't stand right behind him. Call for backup. Even if the situation seems to be diffusing inside of the house and you see that the officer might need some backup, call for backup. You've got a phone. You can phone the charge office or the 911 or 082-911. Observe the room and people for weapons. If you are standing there, you can just do an observation. Also remain alert for people in the house and the apartment when you are entering there. And also then make conversation with the person to whom the officer is not speaking. And you should stand all of the time. This is good advice from level 1. Maintain eye contact with the officer. And keep subjects from making eye contact because you and the officer are facing one another. The victim and the perpetrator is back to back to one another. And remain calm if you can. It's not always possible, but it's doable. And also back up your officer. Always remember who's in charge. It's not you, it's the officer. There's some don'ts also listed there. Yeah, don't enter the house or the apartment ahead of the officer. You don't say, hey, I'm here, I know these people. Don't do that. Even if you know the people, don't go inside of the house in front of the officer because you will blow him off just like that. He won't trust you again. Don't allow the subjects to maintain eye contact with one another. Don't allow a person to leave the room without an officer or a chaplain attending with, going with them. Because they may even go to the kitchen and get a knife, or they may go to their room and fetch the gun. Just go with them. And don't remain silent if you see a weapon. Just say, officer, weapon, right hand there in the corner. Don't allow children or others to distract the officer. Get them away from the officer as he's trying to, settle down this whole situation. And don't get between the officer and the subject. Even if you know the subject, don't get between them. Don't scuffle. Don't get inside of that fight. But unless the officer needs you, of course, you have to get involved with a scuffle there. And then don't allow either a, excuse me, shooting my cable. Don't allow other subjects to believe you have authority over the officer because you don't. You don't have any authority. Even if the officer is, a young man and I'm a great man, you do not have any authority over this officer. The techniques will range from making the subject sit while the officer stands to keeping the subjects separated and facing away from each other. Now, if there's a big shot in the room, and this big shot is really a strong guy, the officer would normally ask them to sit down. The officer will stand and place his hand on top of his shoulder, like that. It won't look bad, but he will just do this. And the reason for that is because then it's very difficult for this guy just to get up when somebody's pushing down on you. All right. So then one such technique which is effective is a non-combative situation is to separate the subject and position them in such a fashion so that their backs are to one another. Now the chaplain action during a misdemeanor stop, what should you do when where to position one's self and why should you position yourself there? You need to protect yourself also because you probably won't have a gun. I'll show you a little bit a picture. Let me see. Yeah, there is the picture. Where not to be positioned and why shouldn't you do that? Let me just show you the picture before we go further. Now this is the traffic flow. And this is the yellow line. Now in America it will be on the other side of the road, of course, but on this side, you are driving on this side of the road. The Americans will be on the other side. So what's happening here is the chaplain will position himself at the police car, you see? Now, and this is the bad guy car. The cop will approach from his driver's side and he will make his way to the driver of the bad guy car. And what you'll do is you'll stand closer and do some inspection concerning that. So this is the best place you could position yourself. If there is a shooting, you'll have to make your way to the backside of the vehicle over here. And that can also happen. Can you look inside of the car? Of course you can. You can show with your flashlight inside of the car. And if you see a gun, the rule applies. You should shout out, there's a gun. And remember now, when you stop this misdemeanor stop, if this is a misdemeanor stop, you should always add one. If you see two perps in the vehicle, you should add one. They must be free, okay? And this is what the rule is about add one. What's a routine stop? A routine stop, and why is it called the routine stop? Because a routine stop is never really a routine stop. Because say, for example, you call it a routine stop, excuse me, and the routine stop says, well, you've got a broken taillight. That's actually a felony, or not a felony, but it's a misdemeanor stop. And you should allow that there sometimes maybe routine stops that can turn out in a felony stop, a shooting incident. So be careful. It's like when the electricity goes off in town, we get letters here in town that tells us, listen, treat every line as if it's alive. So yes, don't think everybody's sleeping in that car, okay? Even if they make as if they are sleeping, they're wide awake. Now, who's always in charge at the scene? You know who's in charge, and that's the officer. The officer will remain in charge. What to do if a subject continues to talk to the chaplain instead of the officer? What should you do? I mean, there will be some times that people will, ignore the officer and start speaking to the chaplain, and just divert them back to the officer. Of course, the chaplain must be prepared and ready to remedy the problem because of the age difference of the chaplain wearing a non-uniform, civilian clothing. They would think that you are in charge of this officer, and you're not. You'll just tell them, listen, I'm not in charge of this scene right now. The officer is in charge. I'm just a ride along. I'm a chaplain. The violator will tend to naturally polarize to the older, plain clothed person. Why is that? Because they do not like the uniform. The talking to the chaplain, the duty of the chaplain will be to walk away from the scene, return to the car, and allow the patrol officer then to do his or her job. So, can you talk to a second subject? Yes, of course you can talk to a second subject. That will help the officer, unless directed otherwise by the patrol officer. Then you just shut up. If the patrol officer tells you, listen, chaplain, you shouldn't speak with these people. They are dangerous people. Just keep your mouth shut then. All right. I think we better get to a close. I'll give you some homework because now we'll just do this slide, and then it's about the Fourth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment doesn't really apply to us here in South Africa. And that's the right of people to be, you can, secure persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches here in South Africa also. But we do not call it the Fourth Amendment, we call it the Bill of Rights. But you can read up on this in your manuals from page 70, 71 at the bottom. But just let's close with this one. And while we discussed this, we're not to position ourselves, of course. We said we shouldn't position ourselves next to the cop or behind the cop. We should always stand away, stand a little. Unless a cop calls you closer, you can come and stand here. If he calls you and tells you, listen, chaplain, you can move closer. Because then, of course, the chaplain would have seen all the hands in the car. That's important. You need to see hands. And even I instruct people, if the cop stops you at nighttime, switch on your cabin light, put your hands on the steering. If you're not driving, put your hands on the dashboard. Or if you're a child at the back, put your hands on the seat in front. I always tell my children, if the cop stops us, we do this, just to show out of respect that we are safe. We are a safe place for the cop. So what do you do when you see a person flee? When you see a person flee from the scene, should you run after them? Although the chaplain is to remain behind the officer and the vehicle, the actions of the felons should be observed at all times. You should observe. You shouldn't run after a felon because maybe that guy's got a gun or a knife. He will use it for sure. If you want to stop him, you bring him under arrest, he will kill you. Not position yourself anywhere in front of the rear bumper. You can position yourself there, but try to get as fast as you can to the backside when there's a shooting or even if there's a scuffle, fighting without guns. Of course, you can go closer and help the officer. Don't let curiosity afflict you. You may only approach the felony vehicle when the officer gives instruction. All right. So this is for tonight. I hope you enjoyed the session. You can go and do some own study on the rest of the coursework, and also I would see you on Thursday night to round up this training session. So yes, I hope it was very informative. I do not know what's going on with my system. It's just frozen. It's like this little dog of mine who wants to get up on the bed over there, but doesn't want to come to his spot here on my lap. Well, thank you for being here, chaplains. I hope I see you on Thursday night. If there's something that's going to happen, I'll just let you know. Is there any questions? Well, nothing. Okay. Have a good night then. I'll see you then on Thursday night, if God wills.